There is a moment, and you know this moment, when you sit in a church pew, or drive home from a Sunday service, or lie awake at midnight scrolling through headlines that feel like they are moving towards something enormous that no one can quite name. A feeling that the world is accelerating. A feeling that the signs everyone is talking about, the wars, the earthquakes, the economic shaking, the moral unraveling, are being handed to you wrapped in fear, wrapped in dread, wrapped in hold on, just survive, just endure. And somewhere underneath all of that, a quieter question you have never been able to fully silence. What if I am reading this wrong? What if the signs are not what you were taught they were? What if the very passages your pastor quotes during prophecy sermons, Matthew 24, Luke 21, contain something that has never been fully preached to you? Not out of malice, not because anyone lied to you, but because there is one verse, a single verse sitting in Luke chapter 21 that changes the entire meaning of everything around it. A verse that most teachers move past without stopping.
The path
A verse
to freedom
that,
begins within,
when you finally
not
read
with
it
the
in
stones
full
of the city.
context, with everything Jesus
You
said
have the
before it
strength you
and
seek.
everything he said after it, does not produce fear. It produces direction. Because here is what most prophecy teaching never tells you. Jesus did not give his disciples a horror list. He gave them a signal map. A precise, sequenced, prophetically ordered set of markers designed not to terrify the people watching them unfold, but to wake them up.
It is true!
He said, when these things begin to happen, not end, not resolve, not come, when they begin, lift up your heads. Your redemption draws near. 2,000 years ago. Spoken to people living under occupation. People under a system of power that had no intention of releasing them. And he looked at them and said,
Do not be afraid.
The storm is not your destruction. The storm is your signal.
Hold fast to what is true.
That is what this video is about. Not doom. Not another prophecy breakdown designed to leave you more afraid than when you pressed play. Not speculation about who the Antichrist is or when exactly the world ends.
I have seen
This
the
is
future,
about what
and it is a
Jesus
place where we
actually
stand
said on
united,
that mountain, the full
unbreakable
sequence,
toward the dawning
the
light.
hidden verse, the signal map, and why everything you are watching in 2025 and 2026 makes complete, precise, undeniable sense once you see it the way he intended. Here is what we are going to cover. We are going to walk through the signs Jesus listed in the exact order he gave them, beginning with the one he placed first. The one that almost no one preaches. The one that, when you understand it, unlocks everything that follows. We are going to look at what I call the Joseph blueprint, 3 precise signs that appeared in Joseph's life, recorded in Genesis, before whose liberation, and map them onto the world you are living in right now with a precision that is difficult to dismiss. We are going to open Isaiah 60 and Ezekiel 37 not as poetic encouragement for difficult seasons, but as specific, measurable, prophetic promises that are activating in ways you can look up, verify, and track in the news today. We are going to examine what Jesus said about the times of the Gentiles in Luke 21:24 and connect it to what is happening in global economics and geopolitics in 2025 in a way that no news anchor is connecting for you. And we are going to end at Luke 21:28, the verse they skipped. The 2 words that transform every headline you read from a source of dread into a source of direction. Stay until the end. Because the last thing Jesus said to people surrounded by signs of collapse was not be afraid. It was look up. And after today you will know exactly why. Open your Bible to Luke chapter 21. Not Matthew 24. Luke 21. Most prophecy teachers go straight to Matthew. And I understand why Matthew 24 is dramatic, cinematic. It reads like a war dispatch from the future. But Luke 21 records the same sermon with different details. Specific details. Details that change everything. And the first detail that changes everything is this. Jesus does not begin his list of signs with wars. He does not begin with earthquakes. He does not begin with famine or plague or the collapse of nations. He begins with something else entirely. Luke 21, verse 8.
The time
Jesus
of warning
speaks.
is upon us.
He says, "See to it that you are not deceived. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am he,
What is it?
and the time is near.
I don't know.
Do
it's
not
beautiful.
follow them."
I can't see. It's too
The
bright.
very first sign. Not war. Not earthquake. Not economic collapse. Deception. Specifically, spiritual deception, operating inside the name of God, coming from people who claim to represent him. Let that sit for a moment. Before the armies march, before the ground shakes, before the currencies fail, the first thing Jesus warns about is false teachers, people standing in pulpits, holding sacred text, speaking the name of Christ and leading people away from truth instead of toward it. Now, why does deception come first? Think about it like a military strategist. Before you can occupy a city physically, you have to break its defenses psychologically. Before the walls come down, you have to convince the people inside that the enemy is actually their ally. Deception is always the first weapon because it is the most powerful. It does not destroy from outside. It dismantles from within. And here is what makes this sign so significant for 2025. We are living in the most information-saturated moment in human history. There are more voices, more platforms, more people claiming to speak for God than at any point since the first century. There are YouTube channels, podcasts, self-proclaimed prophets with millions of followers announcing dates, declaring visions, predicting elections, naming world leaders as the Antichrist. Sometimes in the same week they were wrong about the last prediction.
Do not be afraid of
Jesus
what you must
said,
face.
"Do not follow them."
Remember
Not
the
because
truth I have
prophecy
shown
is
you.
wrong, but because false prophecy is the precise first marker that the sequence has begun. The Apostle Paul echoed this exact warning in 2 Timothy 3:13. Evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. They are not just deceiving others. They themselves are deceived. They genuinely believe what they are saying. That is what makes this so dangerous. The most effective deception is the one the deceiver has already accepted as truth. And here is the layer most teachers miss entirely.
The time has come.
Jesus does not say the first
Choose
sign
your
is
path.
people claiming to be God. He says it is people claiming to represent God, people coming in his name, using the authority of the name of Christ to validate their message. This is not atheism. This is not a competing religion. This is something far more sophisticated. Truth wrapped around error. Light used to conceal darkness. The name of Jesus weaponized to lead people away from Jesus. Take heed that no man deceive you. Matthew 24:4. KJV history gives us a sobering picture of how sign number 1 manifests. The historian Sir John Bagot Glubb, in his 1978 work The Fate of Empires, studied 11 empires from Assyria in 859 BC through the British Empire in the 20th century. His finding: every empire in decline enters what he called the Age of Decadence, a period with moral and religious institutions that once anchored the civilization begin to lose their authority. False teachers, celebrity culture, and superficial spirituality rise to fill the vacuum. That pattern is not historical. That pattern is happening right now. In your news feed, in your recommended videos, in the conference circuit, in the prosperity preaching that promises blessing without obedience, in the prophecy culture that predicts without accountability. Sign number 1 is not coming. Sign number 1 is already here. And once you see it, once you recognize deception as the first marker on Jesus' signal map, you do not respond with fear. You respond with discernment. You become harder to move. You become more rooted in the actual text, not the interpretation of the text that happens to be trending. Jesus placed this sign first for a reason.
Do not be afraid.
Not to paralyze you,
Your faith
to
has
protect
made
you,
whole.
so that when everything else begins to unfold around you, you already have the filter. You already know how to read the room. Do
I
not
tell you
be
with great love,
deceived.
the path
That
of
is
the
not a
heart
passive
is
instruction.
the only way.
That is an active command. It requires you to study. It requires you to compare what you are hearing against what is actually written. It requires you to be the kind of person who opens their Bible not just to find comfort but to find truth. Because the second sign is coming. And when it arrives, you need to already be standing on solid ground. If this is already shifting something in you, if you are hearing something today that your Sunday school never gave you, share this video with one person before it ends. Not after. Right now. Open your phone. Find the person in your life who is drowning in headlines and doesn't have a framework for them, and send this. Truth finds its own landing. Luke 21,
The kingdom of heaven is within your
verse
grasp.
9.
It is not something
Jesus
you chase,
continues,
but something you embrace.
when you hear of a wars
Do
and
not be afraid,
commotions,
for
do
hope
not
is
be
found even in
terrified,
the deepest
for
shadows.
these things
Let
must
us
come
stand
to pass
together
first,
and build anew.
but the end is not immediately. 2 words. Notice them. Do not be terrified.
I understand your pain.
Jesus does not say,
Will you lead
do
us?
not notice.
Yes, but first,
He does not
you must
say,
understand.
these things are not real. He does not say, protect yourself and look away. He says, do not be terrified, which means the signs are real. The upheaval is real. The shaking is real. But terror is the wrong response. And the reason terror is the wrong response is because you are reading the signs incorrectly. You are reading them as a final chapter when they are actually an opening act. Here is what I want to show you. Not theology, history. The British historian Sir John Bagot Glubb studied 11 empires spanning nearly 3,000 years. And he found something remarkable. Every single one followed the same 5-stage collapse pattern before a new order emerged. Egypt, Assyria, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire,
are a traitor to the
everyone.
Republic, Brutus. How dare
Stage
you accuse
1.
me? It is you who
Internal
undermines the
division.
legions.
The system begins fighting itself. Political factions, cultural fractures, the institutions that once united the civilization become arenas of war. Stage 2. Economic instability. The currency weakens. Debt expands beyond management. The gap between the powerful and the powerless becomes a chasm that no policy can bridge. Stage 3. Military overextension. The empire spreads itself across too many theaters simultaneously. It is trying to hold what it can no longer sustain. The cost of control begins to exceed the value of what is being controlled. Stage 4. Moral collapse. The values that built the civilization erode. The institutions religious, civic, educational that once transmitted those values lose their authority in their audience. Stage 5. The rise of the displaced. The people who have been pushed to the margins of the existing order begin to move toward the center.
We will not
Same
be
sequence.
denied.
Every empire,
We move forward.
without exception across
As
30
the
centuries
ancient
of
world
human
gives way to the
history.
new, a
Now
metropolis
look at the
emerges
world
from the
in
very fabric of the
2025.
desert.
NATO, the military alliance that defined Western security for 70 years, is fractured. Member states are publicly disagreeing about fundamental obligations. The United States is simultaneously managing military commitments across the Middle East, Eastern Europe, the Pacific, and the Korean Peninsula while carrying a national debt that crossed $36 trillion in 2024, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. That is Stage 3, military overextension, operating alongside Stage 2, economic instability. Domestically, political polarization in the United States has reached levels not seen since the Civil War era, according to the Pew Research Center's 2024 Political Polarization Studies. Church attendance in mainline Protestant denominations has declined by more than 30% over the last 2 decades. Trust in institutions, government, media, church, academia sits at historic lows across every demographic.
2042 began not with a
That
bang.
is Stage 4, moral collapse, operating in real time. And Stage 5? According to the African Development Bank's 2025 macroeconomic performance and outlook, Africa is projected to grow at 4.1% in 2025 and 4.4% in 2026, outpacing every G7 nation. 12 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies in 2024 were African. BRICS, the economic coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 6 new members added in 2024, including Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE, now represents more than 41% of global GDP by purchasing power parity, and more than half the world's population. The G7, which controlled nearly 52% of global GDP in 1990, now holds less than 29%. The displaced are moving toward the center. That is not geopolitics. That is Glubb's Stage 5, playing out across every continent simultaneously. Now go back to Luke 21:10-11.
The kingdom of heaven is at
Jesus
hand.
says, "Nation will
Repent,
rise
for the
against
hour has
nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. Earthquakes. Note what an earthquake actually does. It does not create weakness. It reveals it. An earthquake is a diagnostic. It shakes the ground and lets every structure tell the truth about what it was built on. The buildings that seemed solid and were not fall. The foundations that were compromised but hidden are exposed. COVID-19 functioned exactly this way. It did not create the fractures in healthcare systems, supply chains, and social safety nets. It revealed them. With terrifying precision, it showed exactly which structures had been built on solid ground, and which had been built on assumptions that could not withstand pressure. And famines not only of food, but of meaning, of purpose, of identity. The mental health crisis sweeping the Western world is a famine of this kind. The American Psychological Association reported in 2023 that anxiety and depression rates in the United States had reached levels previously unseen in recorded data. Young people are the most afflicted, not because they have less than previous generations materially, but because they have been handed a world that is rapidly losing the shared story that once gave suffering a frame of reference. Pestilence. Physical, yes, but also the pestilence of misinformation, of manufactured outrage, of the algorithmic amplification of the most extreme and destabilizing voices in every culture, a kind of cognitive disease spreading at network speed. Jesus listed all of this. He listed it not as a horror catalog, but as a diagnostic.
Do not fear.
He is not
for you are
telling
not
you that
alone.
the world is falling apart to frighten you. He is telling you that what is falling apart was never built to last. And what comes
time
after
is
the
now.
fall, that is what he
The
is
dawn has
actually
come.
pointing toward.
Rise and follow
Do
the
not
path
be
to salvation.
terrified, for these things must come to pass first. First. That word is everything. These are not the destination. These are the necessary condition for what comes next. The labor before the delivery. The deconstruction before the reconstruction. You are watching a world rearrange itself. Not collapse into chaos, rearrange into something the old order was never designed to accommodate. And in the middle of that rearrangement, there is a blueprint. A divine pattern, documented in Genesis, that shows exactly how God moves a person and a people from the lowest place to the highest position. It is the Joseph blueprint, and it changes everything.
No! Please, no!
Genesis 37. Joseph is 17 years old.
Help!
He is thrown into a pit by his own brothers. Not strangers, not enemies. The very people who shared his bloodline, his table, his father's house. They looked at him, the coat of many colors on his back, the dreams in his eyes, and they chose darkness. They threw him into a dry cistern and sat down to eat bread while he cried out from below. That is the first sign of the Joseph blueprint, the pit. Darkness at the hands of those who should have protected you. Genesis 39. Joseph has been sold into Egypt. He is now in the house of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. He has
50,
risen to become
60,
overseer of
70.
everything Potiphar owns, trusted,
Tonight,
capable,
when the moon is highest,
faithful in every
if you
way.
it will be
And
sweet,
Potiphar's
and no
wife
one will
lies about
suspect.
him. She accuses him
measured.
publicly of
You will pay
something
for
he
this.
did not
I will
do,
see to it myself.
something he had
I
actively
am
refused.
not afraid of you.
And the system believes her. Not because the evidence demands it, but because the system was not designed to protect Joseph. He is thrown into prison for a crime that did not happen. That is the second sign. The false accusation. The system turning against the innocent. Justice deferred. The wrong verdict. Documented, enforced, and moved past as if truth were irrelevant. Genesis 40. Joseph is in
I have seen
prison.
the future, and I
He
assure you
meets
that
two
freedom
men,
approaches.
Pharaoh's
You speak with such
cupbearer and
certainty.
baker,
What
both
proof do you
imprisoned,
offer? The proof is in the
both
rising
troubled
sun.
by dreams they
I
cannot
understand your
interpret.
fears.
Joseph
Patience is a
interprets
virtue
both
when
dreams
faith
with
is
perfect
your only
accuracy.
compass.
The baker will
time
die
has
in
come.
3 days.
My
The
deepest
cupbearer
thanks.
will be restored to his position. Before the cupbearer leaves,
you,
Joseph
the
makes
sake of
one
all
request.
I will do
Remember
what
me
I
when
can,
it is
brother.
well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh,
Find me.
and get me out of this house. Genesis 40:14. The cupbearer is restored. He walks back into Pharaoh's palace. And Genesis 40:23 records a sentence that should break your heart. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. 2 full years pass. Genesis 41:1. That is the third sign. The forgotten promise. The person who could have helped didn't. The door that should have opened didn't. The justice that should have arrived didn't. 2 more years of waiting on a promise that seemed to have evaporated the moment the circumstances of the one who made it improved. The pit. The false accusation. The forgotten promise.
In the
3
beginning,
signs.
the very first
documented
word of the
in
ancient text
Genesis.
reveals a divine
And
origin.
here is what makes this more than a biography. This is a blueprint. This is God establishing a pattern in the opening chapters of Scripture that He returns to again and again across human history. Because the Joseph blueprint has a 4th chapter, and it is the one that changes everything that came before it. Genesis 41. Pharaoh has 2 dreams that no one in Egypt can interpret. Not one court advisor. Not one priest. Not one wise man in the most powerful empire on earth. And suddenly the cupbearer remembers. Now I remember. Genesis 41:9. Joseph is brought out of prison. He is cleaned up, dressed, and brought before Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. Joseph is 30 years old. Genesis 41:46. From 17 to 30, 13 years of pit,
The knowledge
prison,
we hold is ancient
and
and
forgotten
powerful,
promises.
meant to guide us through these uncertain
And in a
times.
single
Listen
conversation,
closely.
in a single day, everything turns. Pharaoh places his own signet ring on Joseph's finger. He clothes him in fine linen. He puts a gold chain around his neck. He makes him second in command over all of Egypt. Genesis 41:42-43. Second in command over all of Egypt. Not slowly, not incrementally, not after a committee review. On the same day he walked out of prison. Now here is what I need you to understand
awaits
about the
those who
Joseph
truly
blueprint.
seek it, and
It
nothing
is
else
not a
matters.
comfort story. It is not a feel-good message about patience. It is a divine operating procedure. It is God showing you, in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, exactly how he moves a person from the lowest position to the highest assignment. And it happens not despite the suffering. It happens through it. The pit did not destroy Joseph. It removed him from his brother's reach and placed him in the exact geographic location where his destiny was waiting. Egypt. Where Pharaoh's palace was. Where the famine was coming. Where he needed to be. The false accusation did not end his story. It placed him inside Pharaoh's prison, the one prison in all of Egypt that housed the king's own officials.
Change is coming to your
The
land.
cupbearer and the baker would never have crossed Joseph's path any other way. The forgotten promise did not abandon him. It held him in place for 2 more years, during which Joseph continued to serve, to develop, to refine, until Pharaoh's dream arrived at exactly the right moment to pull him out. Every sign that looked like destruction was actually positioning. The question for you, sitting with this right now, is not, why has this happened to me? The question is, where is this placing me? Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications right now. The next video in this series goes directly into what the palace looks like after the prison, what Joseph's governance model reveals about how God's people are meant to lead when the season turns. You do not want to miss that. Subscribe now. Open to Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Stop before verse 2. Notice something. You do not tell someone to arise if they are already standing. You tell someone to arise when they are down, when they have been pressed, when the weight of what they have been carrying has bent them toward the ground. The command to arise is given specifically to people in a position of descent, and it is given in the imperative. Not a suggestion. Not an encouragement. A command.
mere moments, the
Now verse 2. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Darkness covering the earth is not the end of the story. It is the backdrop for what God is about to do. Every painter knows that light is most visible against darkness. Every photographer knows that the contrast between shadow and brilliance is what makes an image arresting. God does not remove the darkness before he reveals the light. He reveals the light through the darkness. The darkness is the condition that makes the light visible. Verse 3. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Nations. Plural. Not a small gathering of sympathizers. Nations moving toward the light of a people who were once in darkness. Leaders taking notice. The geopolitical center of gravity shifting, not because of military conquest, not because of economic leverage in the traditional sense, but because of a rising that is visible from a distance. Now verse 5. Then you will see and be radiant, and your heart will thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea will be turned to you, the wealth of the nations will come to you. Wealth of the nations. This is specific economic language embedded inside prophetic poetry. It is not describing a spiritual metaphor. It is describing the actual redistribution of material wealth, flowing toward a people who had previously been the ones from whom wealth was extracted. Now open to Ezekiel 37, verse 1. The hand of the Lord was upon me, And he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones, dry bones, scattered, disconnected, bleached by the sun. Ezekiel is not looking at a battle wound, he is looking at something that has been dead for a very long time. Long enough that the flesh is gone. Long enough that the identity is gone. What remains are pieces bone to bone but no connection between them. And God asks Ezekiel the strangest question in verse 3, "Son of man, can these bones live?" God knows the answer. He is asking Ezekiel because he wants him to feel the full weight of the impossibility before he witnesses the miracle. The question is designed to produce humility, and Ezekiel answers correctly. "O Lord God, you know." Then God speaks to the bones. Verse 7, "So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to its bone." A rattling first, before the flesh, before the breath, before the standing. A rattling. When scattered things begin to reconnect, it starts as a rattling. It is disruptive. It is uncomfortable. The system does not know how to categorize it. The old structures cannot contain it. But it is not chaos, it is assembly. It is bones finding each other across the distance that separated them. Now connect both prophecies to what is documentable right now. The African Development Bank's 2025 Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook projects Africa's real GDP growth at 4.1% in 2025, accelerating to 4.4% in 2026 and 2027. 12 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies in 2024 were African nations. The continent that was systematically extracted from across 5 centuries its minerals, its labor, its people, is now outgrowing the economies that extracted from it.
For centuries,
That is
the
not
ultimate store of
development aid
value.
working.
Now,
That is
it meets
Isaiah
the digital
65, the
age.
wealth of the nations turning toward you. BRICS, the coalition now representing more than 41% of global GDP and more than half of the world's population, formally added Ethiopia and Egypt as members in 2024. 2 nations named explicitly in ancient prophetic literature. Psalm 68:31. Envoys will come from Egypt. Ethiopia will quickly stretch out her hands to God. 2 nations specifically called out in Scripture, now positioned at the center of the emerging global economic order. That is not a coincidence of geography. That is bone coming to bone. And Ezekiel 37 does not end at the rattling. It does not end at the bones coming together. Verse 8, flesh appears. Verse 9, the breath comes.
And so the breath
And
of
verse
life
10,
swept through the valley.
so I prophesied as he
awakening the
commanded
silent
me,
forms from
and the
their
breath
slumber.
came into them, and they came to life and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army. Not survivors, not refugees, not victims of a system that tried to destroy them. An exceedingly great army. The rattling is what you are watching right now. The bones are finding each other. The reconnection is happening, which means according to the pattern God established in Ezekiel, what comes after the rattling is the breath. And after the breath is the standing. And when they stand, they do not stand as anything less than what God declared, an exceedingly great army. Luke 21, verse 24. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Until. That word is everything. Until is not permanent. Until is a boundary. Until is a covenant word, a word that signals that what is currently true will not always be true. That what currently holds authority is operating within a time limit that was set before the condition began. Jesus is describing a specific era, what he calls the times of the Gentiles,
The sun is setting on the old ways.
a season
Believe.
in which a particular order of geopolitical and spiritual authority holds dominance. And he says that season has an end. Not maybe. Not potentially. Until it is fulfilled. Completed. Finished. Done. Now I want to be clear. Theologians have debated the precise meaning of this verse for centuries, and I am not claiming a single definitive interpretation. What I am showing you is a pattern, one that a growing number of biblical scholars and historians are documenting independently, that connects this language to something measurable happening right now. The phrase times of the Gentiles in this interpretive tradition refers to the era of Western, Greco-Roman, European civilization's dominant authority over the global order. The era that began with Rome's occupation of Jerusalem, extended through the Byzantine Empire, through the Crusades, through the age of European colonial expansion that divided Africa, Asia, and the Americas among competing Western powers, and extended through the 20th century American-led international order. The order is restructuring, and the numbers documented in terms that require no theological interpretation whatsoever. In 1990, the G7, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States controlled nearly 52% of global GDP measured at purchasing power parity, according to IMF data. In 2024, that figure had fallen to 29%. In the same period, BRICS expanded from a theoretical grouping to a 10-member coalition with 8 partner nations on the path to full membership, now representing more than 41% of global GDP and more than half the world's population. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and the continent's largest economy, joined BRICS as a partner in January 2025. Indonesia, the 4th most populous country on Earth, became a full member the same month. These are not small additions. These are civilizational anchors moving into alignment with a new center of global gravity. At the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia in October 2024, 55 heads of state or senior government representatives attended more than the United Nations General Assembly that year. The agenda included the creation of alternative financial infrastructure that would reduce dependence on the US dollar for international trade settlements. This is not rebellion. This is economics following a prophetic pattern that was written down before any of these nations existed in their current form. And here is what Jesus says comes immediately after the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Verse 25, and there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations. Verse 26, men's hearts failing them from fear in the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then verse 27, Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And immediately before that, verse 28. The verse that changes everything. The verse that most prophecy sermons skip past. The verse that was placed in Luke's account specifically, deliberately, and with surgical precision. Now when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Not when they end, when they begin. That verse is what the next chapter is entirely about. Right now, drop a comment below. Tell me, which sign has hit you hardest in this video? Was it the hidden verse in Luke 21? Was it the Joseph blueprint? Was it the BRICS data mapping onto Isaiah 60? Tell me which one stopped you cold. And if this video is giving you a framework you have needed, share it right now. Someone in your life is watching the news in fear tonight. Give them this instead. Luke 21, verse 28. Now when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Read it one more time. Slowly. When these things begin to happen. Not when they end. Not when the storm clears. Not when the system repairs itself. Not when conditions improve. Not when someone in authority finally acknowledges what you have been living through. When they begin. The trigger for your response is not the resolution of the signs. The trigger is the appearance of the signs.
The time is short.
Jesus says, telling
We
you
must
that the
turn
moment
back
you
now,
see these things starting,
before it is
deception
too
rising,
late.
nations in conflict, economies shaking, the old order straining under its own weight, that is when you lift your head. Not in spite of what you see. Because of what you see. Because what you are seeing is not the end. It is the announcement. Now I want to show you something about this verse that has nothing to do with theology and everything to do with attention. Read the Gospel of Luke straight through, all 24 chapters. Every time Jesus speaks to people under pressure, people in poverty, people under occupation, people whom the system has marginalized, what is the consistent direction of his instruction?
I have been searching for you.
Rise.
Do
Stand
not be
up.
afraid.
Luke 13:12. He
Come.
sees a woman bent over for 18 years, unable to straighten herself. He says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And immediately she straightens. Stretch out. Luke 6:10. To the man with the withered hand. Not wait for better circumstances. Not petition for accommodation. Stretch it out. Come out. To the dead. In John 11:43. The command given to someone who has no natural capacity to respond and who responds anyway. Lift up your heads. There is a direction in the
time has
commands
come
of
To
Jesus.
choose a new path.
It is always upward.
Look ahead.
It is
towards the
always
light.
forward. It is always toward the position you are designed to occupy, not the position the current order has assigned to you. And here is what lift up your heads communicates in the cultural and historical context in which Jesus spoke it. In the ancient Near East, a boathead was the posture of subjugation. A slave before a master. A conquered people before an occupying force. A defendant before a court that has already decided the verdict. The head bowed is the body communicating, "I am beneath you. I accept your authority over me. I have internalized the hierarchy that places me here." Jesus looks at people in exactly that position, and he says, "Lift
Do
it
not
up."
be afraid.
Not when you have
Your
permission.
spirit is
Not
free.
when the court has revised its ruling. Not when the occupying force has packed its bags. Now, when these things begin. Because the moment you lift your head, you change what you can see. A boathead sees only the ground. It sees the dust. It sees the weight of what has pressed it down. A lifted head sees the horizon. It sees what is coming. It sees in the language of Luke 21:28 that redemption is drawing near. Your redemption draws near. Not their redemption. Yours. Specifically. Personally. Covenantally. The word translated redemption in this verse is the Greek apolutrosis. It carries the meaning of liberation from bondage through the payment of a ransom. It is the word used in the New Testament for the act by which captives are set free, by which debts are canceled, by which what was lost is returned. And Jesus says, when you see these signs beginning, this is the signal that your liberation is approaching. Not receding. Approaching. Now let me bring everything we have examined into one frame. The first sign Jesus listed deception operating inside the name of God that is already here. The second sign nations in conflict. The shaking of the old order's foundations that is already here. The Joseph blueprint, the pit. The false accusation. The forgotten promise, those chapters are already documented. The Isaiah 60 promise, the arising. The shining. The nations coming toward the light, the data shows it beginning. The Ezekiel 37 rattling, the scattered pieces finding each other, it is audible if you are listening. The Luke 21:24 timeline, the times of the Gentiles entering their closing chapter, the geopolitical and economic evidence is documentable, verifiable, and accelerating. Every sign points in the same direction. Every thread, when pulled to its source, arrives at the same place. And in the middle of all of it, Jesus speaks two words that cut through every narrative of doom, every theology of mere endurance, every sermon that was designed to produce compliance instead of direction. Look
I saw
up.
the truth,
That is your
and
assignment.
it is here among us.
Not surviving, not enduring, not waiting for permission that is never coming from the system that issued the chains. Looking up, because the one who told you to look up is the same one who has been moving the pieces into position since before your birth, since before your grandparents' birth, since before the first chapter of the suffering that shaped the people you come from. He was working in the pit. He was working in the prison. He was working in the 2 years of the forgotten promise. And he is working right now in the headlines that frighten you, in the geopolitical shifts you cannot fully explain, in the economic movements that seem too large to track, in the spiritual awakening that feels unstoppable because it is. Joseph did not see the palace from the pit. He could not see it from the prison. He could not see it on the day the cupbearer walked out and said nothing. But the palace was being prepared for him the entire time. And when Pharaoh called his name, Joseph was
The time
ready.
is upon us.
Your name is being called.
I am ready.
The question is whether your head is up enough to hear it. Take a breath. What happened in this video was not information transfer. Something moved. I know it did because truth moves things. Real truth. The kind that has been waiting for you longer than this video has existed, does not land quietly. It lands like a stone into still water, and the ripples do not stop at the edge of the screen. Let me bring it all together one final time. Jesus gave his disciples a signal map, not a horror list. He placed the signs in a specific sequence, beginning with deception, moving through the shaking of the old order, and always arriving at the same destination. Your redemption draws near. The Joseph blueprint runs through the center of it. The pit, the prison, the forgotten promise, not as the final chapter, but as the necessary chapters before the palace. The suffering is not evidence of abandonment. It is evidence of preparation. Isaiah 60 and Ezekiel 37 are not poetic metaphors waiting for a future fulfillment you cannot see. They are prophetic descriptions of a pattern that is measurable, documentable, and accelerating right now in 2025 and 2026. And Luke 21:28, the verse that most prophecy sermons skip, is not a footnote. It is the point.
The time has come.
It is the command embedded inside the
Breathe
signal
with me
map
now.
that tells you exactly
Let us
what
rise
to do
together.
when you recognize the signs. Look up, lift up your heads. Your redemption draws near. You are not the victim of these signs. You are the evidence of these signs. You are not what happened to you. You are what God designed through you. The pit was preparation. The prison was education. The forgotten promises were formation. And Pharaoh, the moment, the assignment, the calling that requires exactly what you have been refined into, is about to call your name. Make sure your head is up when it does. 3 things before you close this video. 1. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every video on this channel is designed to give you what the Sunday school never did: the full picture, the full text, the full signal map. The next video goes deeper into what comes after the palace, what Joseph's governance model reveals about how people who survive the pit are meant to lead when the season turns. 2. Drop a comment right now. Type "I see the signal" and tell me where you are watching from. Lagos or London? Atlanta or Kingston? Manila or Melbourne? The gathering is global and your comment is part of it. 3. Share this video before you close the app. Not tomorrow. Right now. Find the person in your life who is reading headlines in fear tonight and has no framework for what they are watching. Send this to them. Truth finds its own landing, you just need to put it in the right hands. The signal is not against you. It never was. Look up.